another 2026 release among the pile, which at time of writing only came out yesterday. And this right here is why my backlog is going to continue being an uphill battle. Motorslice is one of many titles I discovered in passing a couple years back thanks to Twitter's algorithm doing its job and showing me things I'm actually interested in. It follows a girl named P, and her drone follower/Lakitu type camera follower exploring a gargantuan megastructure in the hunt for a series of rogue machines as they fight their way to the top. That's the most you get in the way of story. There are other background elements sprinkled in during some of the optional conversations, but the purpose of the structure or why we're doing what we're doing is left pretty vague, which I'm totally okay with. Vagueness in world design has become something of a lost art in an age of deep lore, where everything needs explanation. Motorslice wears its inspirations on its sleeve, with its big selling point being its huge world with equally huge bosses and using parkour to get around. Many people have brought up Mirror's Edge as a comparison, but I think that's outright erasure of the series that put parkour platforming and gaming on the map and actually was in third person, that being the Prince of Persia Sands of Time trilogy. I can see why they wanted to harken back to something like this, since parkour-focused platforming has fallen out of favour over the years. Most we get nowadays is jumping between preset climbing spots, which is just the industry doing what the Uncharted games were doing, but with even less player agency involved. I guess there is Assassin's Creed, but I've only played the first one, and from what I've heard about how far that franchise has strayed from its roots, I don't know if it's even still part of the equation anymore. Do people even remember that series was a spiritual successor to Prince of Persia at some point? Movement controls pretty smoothly, and the way forward is usually signposted clearly. Some of the side paths could feel a little vague though. I will say most of my deaths were my own blunders, which is a good sign. Not nearly as many moments of actions just refusing to register as you could get from Prince of Persia or especially Mirror's Edge. Beyond regular parkour tricks, P can also use her trusty chainsaw to zip across specially marked surfaces, the titular motor slicing. It's a great spin on the regular parkour, allowing you to clear greater distances than you could with regular movement, and syncs pretty well with the rest of the parkour options. All except for having to make 90-degree turns at least. This was giving me so much shit, especially on one of the boss fights in which a large portion of getting around it required this. You effectively have to stop on a dime to change direction, but there's a bit of a delay involved from your last movement which can either lead you to careening off the edge or onto a surface that can't be sliced, and that's not even getting into how often you'll try to change one direction but end up misinputting and going the same direction you already were again. It kind of gave me the impression that this game was designed with a keyboard in mind, because controller inputs for these sections in general felt especially specific on a gamepad, not helped by the camera angle sometimes muddying what qualified as pointing up. Moments like that aside, the parkour controls pretty smoothly, and it's very satisfying to pull off a string of maneuvers together without messing up. As part of general exploration, there are drones that can be found off the beaten path. They show up when you activate a perimeter scan, require you to get close enough to them, and then return to these triangle sections for them to be extracted. If you die before they can be extracted, then you need to try again. It's nice to have them there if you want a bit of an extra challenge, but there isn't much incentive to collect these things. There's an achievement to extract 30 of them, but from what I gathered looking at the post-game chapter select, there are at least 200 of them in the whole game, with no reward as far as I could see for collecting all of them outside of doing it for completeness sake. Maybe an alternate costume or a different ending unlocks if you find them all? I wouldn't know. I missed a whole bunch due to dying and reloading at certain checkpoints further ahead than would allow me to recollect them. Or usual business of me taking one route that seemed out of the way enough that it surely led to secrets but instead put me on the critical path. A tale as old as time. After a while I had missed so many that I just didn't bother with them outside of the ones I happened across along the way. To break up all the platforming gauntlets, there's also enemies to fight along the way in the form of these rogue machines. While the combination of visual effects and satisfying sounds make carving up machines with your chainsaw feel pretty satisfying, combat isn't all that exciting and is just kinda there. Basic slashing, a charge attack, and occasionally parrying.
Whoa! Is that blackface, dude?
Tactics only ever switch up when new enemies get introduced, but even then there's only like 3 of them in the whole game. I don't mind this all that much though. It's like regular fodder in most other platformers, though giving the protagonist a chainsaw as a weapon maybe gave an impression there would be a bit more to combat. But lo and behold, there actually is, and that's where boss fights come into play. These encounters are where the clear shadow of the Colossus inspiration can be seen. Rather than being based around combat, bosses implement platforming to beat them, which is far more interesting. Someone saw that fight against Marx and Nier Automata and thought they could theme an entire boss roster around huge sentient industrial vehicles. Them also hiring Kira Buckland to voice a stoic tsundere on a mission to kill machines was certainly not without intent. These fights make for a hell of a spectacle. I have nothing but respect for the person who looked at a photo of one of those massive mining trucks and thought, wouldn't it be awesome if we could kill that? Because hey, they were right. Damaging bosses comes down to using the motor slicing technique on certain parts of their body until you're able to reach all of them. As regular combat is de-emphasized, bosses have attacks that can cause you harm while you're closing the distance, but they can't do much harm to you once you're actually on them. They occasionally have saws or some of those industrial crushes along the way, but most of the challenge comes from not falling to your death. Thank God for mid-boss fight checkpoints, because some of these in the latter half of the game could get really testy. A few of them aren't quite as gargantuan as you'd expect, with the helicopter being the smaller scale fight, but nonetheless still great fun working around the environment to get at it. The crane boss was the one I probably had the most trouble with. There were long stretches of time where it wouldn't slow down nor lower its cranes to be parried, so I kept respawning on its back feeling like I was doing something wrong. The final boss was probably the most disappointing though. Without spoilers, it's a really interesting idea that had some hazards built into it that felt like they were going to come into play during a second phase. But I parried it, knocked it to the ground, took out all of its health, and then it just never got back up. It barely put up a fight. I get the distinct feeling that may have been a bug. Outside of the whole scaling large bosses and whittling away at their weak points thing, it's clear a lot of inspiration was taken from Team Ico's games in the environment design as well, particularly those seen in Ico and The Last Guardian, especially in the large, empty, seemingly functionless structures that make you feel minuscule and a lot of the generally lonely atmosphere. It's visually a great mishmash of exaggerated industrial facilities, ancient temples, brutalist architecture, castles, and with just a hint of sci-fi thrown in.
I hope you like sand.
There's also these stone couches between chapters that I think I'm pretty safe in assuming is a nod to the ones from Ico. You can't properly sit on them to take a load off though. That's a shame. What the hell is going on here? On top of the world design meshing many different ideas together, the game's general aesthetics follow suit. It has model and environmental quality somewhere between the PS2 and PS3 generation, with texture quality that would be right at home on the PS1. It felt a little jarring in places, particularly with the holes on the ends of pipes or the very square moles on P's skin. But overall it looks pretty nice, with it especially shining on the larger machinery. With the drone follower Orby effectively being the player surrogate, you can interact with P throughout the journey during both gameplay and some preset slack-off segments. You can get a reaction out of her in certain instances by poking her or making her bashful by getting too close. If you pester her too much in the title screen, she'll even bat away the cursor and eventually hit the quit game button. That's a cute detail, I've always enjoyed stuff like that. There are plenty of discussions that let you get to know her and serve as a nice break between the more hectic segments.
You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.
Throughout the game you do get the distinct impression that the devs really liked P. During the slack-off sequences you get some dialogue with her, ending with a binary choice response from Orby. The two choices more often than not being something along the lines of, "Focus P, remember the mission," and "Oh god, please step on me." There is a lot of suggestive interactions, dialogue and sounds in this game. The camera angles, the manner in which P pants after running for a bit. Heh, P pants. The way she calls out Orby's name when you activate selfie mode, they knew exactly what they were doing. And hey, no judging here. They know their audience and I'm certainly not made of stone. Fan service has its place. But even still, I was impressed how often they'd shamelessly skirt the line without resorting to upfront smut. Most of the time at least. If you know, you know. P even gets her feet out at some point after making a Star Wars prequel reference. Camera very intently focusing on it. Honestly, part of me respects the temerity, but also... Overall, I have to say I was really impressed with this one. I was following this game's development for a couple years and the previews they regularly showed off gave me the impression there wasn't a huge amount to this game. But no, there's a pretty sizable amount of game here. Props to the marketing team for keeping restrained in what they showed off. Huge levels with many hidden or alternate pathways, 8 chapters in total with a boss each, which took me a bit over 10 hours to complete. Probably closer to 8 or 9 since I got pulled away a few times. The parkour was very enjoyable and well implemented, the sound effects were satisfying, the bosses were way more hits than miss, and that soundtrack was pretty great. Regular Studio, please chuck that stuff on the Steam store. I have 14 New Zealand dollars with your name on it. With no shortage of retro-inspired platformers in this day and age, so I figured I'd look at one that harkens back to a game I'm not nostalgic for because it came out when I was barely walking, and I only played it for the first time a few years ago, that being Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country is a game I walked away from thinking was... fine. I enjoyed my time with it enough, but it was a bit of a one and done for me, not really my cup of tea. Despite that, Windswept still caught my eye amongst the crowd and was among many upcoming titles I tried a demo for a couple years back. Windswept begins with Marbles and Checkers, a young duck and turtle who are swept up in a windstorm and sent far away from home. Upon meeting up, the duo must work together to overcome the many trials ahead to find their way back home in the most roundabout route possible. Simple and to the point. Like its inspiration, you can swap between the duo during gameplay with the push of a button, utilising their unique abilities whenever needed, like Marble's glide and Chicker's drop dash. They can also perform some team actions, with Chickers being thrown to the side to take out enemies or serve as a temporary springboard, or Marbles being thrown up into the air to grab out of reach goodies or as a way to ascend to those hard to reach platforms. Much like DKC though, taking a hit will cause the controlled character to scamper off scared, leaving the other to fend for themselves one hit away from death unless they can find a bubble to free their buddy. You'll want to try to keep them together as much as you can if you're trying to get all the collectibles though, because many can only be reached with their combined abilities. Animal buddies are also here as another DKC homage, oftentimes crucial for getting through sections, while others are just a bonus to make things a lot easier if utilised correctly. They're another case where getting hit will usually cause you to lose them, but levels where they aren't required to finish will still offer you a reward for clearing a section and sending them on their way through a portal. Nice bit of bonus incentive. There's a decent selection of shiny goodies to collect in this game. Star coins are found all over the place and can be used to spend on action figures of the character roster. Moon coins are a reward for completing hidden challenge portals and can be used to unlock lamps facilities around the map. Cloud tokens go towards a post-game level that requires all the clouds to reach the top, much the same as the Great Hall in Crash Bandicoot needing every gem to cross all the pits. Pinwheels are awarded for landing on the end goal from a great enough height, essentially the equivalent of the gold flagpoles from some of the Mario games. Vinyls unlock songs from the game's soundtrack to be played at will on the jukebox. Then there's 5 gold coins hidden around that spell out Comet. Finding all of these will make a Comet token manifest near the end of the stage. If you want a real challenge though, there are retro game cartridges hidden in certain levels too. These unlock bonus minigames. They're so well hidden that I was only able to collect one of them, and the only other one I came across I could not for the life of me figure out how to reach. To circumvent the regular platformer cheesing, picking up these collectibles requires a few seconds to get comfortable on the HUD before you actually get to keep them. Don't go thinking you can just jump to your death to collect that Comet coin over the pit. Figure it out, nerd. Many of the hiding places for these trinkets can be very tough to spot, but they're thankfully all signposted in the environment in clear but subtle ways. They don't go having you make leaps of faith to find coins tucked away on far out of view platforms or anything. Each of them are usually indicated with distinct broken parts in the environment or slightly obscure star coins indicating there's something more to the place you're in. Despite all that, collectibles in this game are left entirely to the player's prerogative. There aren't any progress gates or anything that require you to have a certain amount of a particular type of item to proceed, so you can just make a beeline for the end goal if that's all you're after. Windswept's art is absolutely adorable. From our 2 intrepid protagonists, Checkers and Marbles, to even the extensive rogues gallery. I almost feel bad for killing some of these guys. The sprite work here is gorgeous and really pops. Colours are used very thoughtfully to breathe life into each area while making the way forward always clear. That cute presentation is a front to distract you from the fact that this game is hard as hell at times. True enough to its Super Nintendo inspirations, I suppose. Everything started out unassuming enough, but I had a suspicion about a difficulty hike when higher end techniques like wave dashing were introduced early on. At least they're ripping off the band-aid early, unlike Celeste introducing the wave dash near the end of the game. I say that most of the regular stages in the game aren't too bad until the last few zones, but then you also have the bonus levels unlocked by spending your moon coins at lamps areas. These things will push your shit in and make you use every technique you know to your full ability. You only get one hit as well. You need to utilize both Checkers and Marble's abilities to stay alive because one hit will end both of them and checkpoints are very infrequent. There is one thing I'm immensely thankful for though. If you get stuck partway through a stage and can't bring yourself to continue, you can quit, go elsewhere, and come back to it later from the last checkpoint you were at without losing your collectibles up to that point. I was up very late on a work night beating my head against this level, so I'm glad I could put it down and come back to it with a clearer head the next day. At least that's what I told myself at the time, because the side levels were what convinced me I wasn't going to 100% this game. Recently I've been trying to beat out a compulsion I have to go for 100% completion as much as I do. It had gotten to a point that I'd end up pouring many hours into trying to finish everything in mini-games even when that process long since stopped being fun. Sometimes it's fine with just being content to make it to the end. I told myself that here because in the last third of the game I was beginning to get very frustrated with some stages. I've 100% completed both Super Meat Boy and Celeste, but dying in those games didn't make me angry. It made me drive to keep at it. Windswept, however, was starting to make me angry. I don't know what difference it was in particular that led me to lose any desire to keep pursuing completion in this game that the former two didn't prove a barrier, but it is something I'd like to be able to narrow down and articulate one of these days. I didn't hate my time with Windswept. There's a lot to like here. The movement controls smoothly with the kind of skill ceiling offering tons of potential for speedrun tech. It's very visually appealing, and there's plenty to do for those bold enough to try going for everything. There was something about this that just wasn't clicking for me though. While it's far from the hardest game I've played, some of those late levels cram in so much bullshit with huge checkpoint gaps to the point I would have lost a lot more investment in it if I actually wanted to try getting everything. If you're a big Donkey Kong Country fan, then you'll probably adore this game. But much like its inspiration, Windswept wasn't quite up my alley. Here we have another solo dev experience that demonstrates the beauty of simplicity. Refunct is a bite-sized first-person platformer that centers around a point A to B goal. You're dropped in an endless void of ocean with many pillars off in the background and a series of structures beneath the surface. Upon climbing to the top of the first structure you're spawned on and pressing a big red button, more platforms spawn nearby with another red button to push, indicated by a beacon showing your destination. The name of the game is to navigate the ever-changing environment to press every single button and uncover the rest of the structure, getting increasingly complex in layout as you go. The controls are pretty simple, but there are techniques such as crouching and wall hopping that you learn to utilize and reach some harder to access points. It does it all organically as well, teaching you what to do purely by presenting an obstacle to you and leaving it to the player's own experimentation. Beyond the core focus of completing the structure, there's also some stuff to do on the side to cater to those completionist tendencies. A series of red nodes can be found throughout the map and some more hard to reach places as a reward for people who like to explore and get better with the movement. For the obsessive compulsives, there's the way platforms gain colour once you step on top of them, and your percentage is tracked until you've found them all. Alternatively, you can also try the challenge of completing the game with less than 33% of the platforms coloured, which effectively turns it into a puzzle game, strategically moving from one button to the next while trying to find pathways that minimise contact with the ground. My favourite of these was definitely the time challenges though, requiring you to learn the layout as it appears and mastering the movement to complete the structure as fast as possible. It's not a long game, so it's very possible to get to the end in under 4 minutes. That's about the most I can say about Refunct without just playing the game for yourself. Absolutely check this one out if it sounds interesting to you. It's cheap as chips, can easily be finished in a sitting, and it's a generally very zen platforming experience in a bite-sized package. As a quick aside before I get into the main event, D-Cell released a short free prologue for this game by the name of Unbeatable White Label. It's only about an hour long and serves as a decent tutorial and a not quite refined sneak peek of what the full game would end up being like. Sort of like Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes or Kingdom Hearts 0.2 A Fragmentary Passage. It was fun enough with about a dozen songs to it, but in the context of the full release, it's honestly not anything you absolutely need to play. The cutscenes are all unique to this, but the songs here are all available in the full game. So I have a bit of a shaky relationship with rhythm games. I like them, but I absolutely suck at them. I do well enough when I get in the zone, but I'm the kind of person who after a couple of misinputs will get flustered and spend the rest of an attempt floundering to the point I may as well restart. I have a decent sense of timing, but clearly not the hand-eye coordination to back it up in a gameplay setting. Despite that, I opted to play on hard difficulty here because that was stated by the devs as the intended way to play. I do appreciate the verbose descriptions they gave to the difficulty levels. Unbeatable was yet another in the collection of demos I tried out back in 2024. I really liked what I saw, and it left me in anticipation for the full release. The soundtrack had some great jams and I loved the visual design. It kinda looked like if Studio Trigger did The World Ends With You, which is an alternate world I'd love to see because it would likely be much better than the anime adaptation that we did get. Unbeatable is an anime-inspired 2.5D rhythm game built around a simple premise, a world where music is illegal and you do crimes. The story is set in a world that was turned into a sound-dampened fascist state, and our heroes form a band as an act of rebellion. The central character Beat is the vocalist, Quaver on guitar, Treble on keys, and Clef on drums. It's going with a theme, you see, so pretty much every named character in the story is based on a musical motif. The world seems to be dealing with creatures called Silents, which manifest whenever music plays, and the state of the world is all one big overcorrection to keep people safe. The Silents are established as a means to serve the gameplay, being sentient notes that rush towards you and have to be smacked away to the beat of the music. The core rhythm game in Unbeatable operates with a simple 2-button control scheme and 2 lanes for notes to approach from, high and low. That doesn't stop things from getting hectic though, as there are many varieties of silence that come at you. Outside of standard fodder you have hold and release notes, 2 shot notes that need to be juggled between both lanes, spike obstacles to be jumped or ducked, middle notes that require a pounding in succession with smaller oncoming dots, big bastards that are there for button mashing, and occasionally some others which show up so rarely and with no formal tutorial that they feel like a bit of a dick move. To mix things up, the camera in the arena can also switch from left to right, or even both sides concurrently. Silents are still attacked with the same buttons, but I can't tell you how many times this threw me off. I use the shoulder buttons on a controller and my brain kept auto-adjusting to left and right rather than up and down. These were a whole lot of fun though, and clearly where the most polish and effort went into. There are other forms of rhythm minigames that appear during the story, but these don't feel nearly as refined. The baseball sections were mostly fine once you learn to rely more on the audio cues rather than the visual. The beatdown ones are like a more simplified version of the regular music stages with prompts coming from above and below rather than the sides. I really didn't care for these. They get super disorienting when you have tons of them coming from both sides on higher difficulties. Many of the inputs in some of these other rhythm games could get very visually unclear. Sometimes they would even barely correlate to the music. I may not be the best at rhythm games, but I've still played enough of them to know when I'm being had. Like in the highway chase, the bullets have to basically be inside you for a full second before you can kick them back. The rhombus prompts during the rail grinding segments were probably the worst. Between depth perception and weird input timing, it felt like a roll of the die if these things would even accept my button presses. It almost always felt like a crapshoot, and the bits where you have to time your inputs with a shrinking circle felt like the time was always slightly off, no matter how much I tweaked the offset to my preference. The presentation can sometimes be detrimental to the gameplay. There were a handful of moments where an on-screen effect would obscure an upcoming note and you'd have a split second to react to a hold note, or several times where it felt like the timing was off with visual transitions, and the chart map would slide on screen with prompts I had already missed sliding by. I first noticed this in the prison escape segment when I came out of a cutscene and DC was already attacking me, because some of the prompts had already appeared off screen. It was far from the last time something like that happened as well. It wasn't enough that it made things too difficult, but it was frequent enough to become annoying. Though even the weakest rhythm minigames are leagues better than the other minigames you come across in the story, which often feel like they were programmed in an afternoon. That prison ball game was awful to play. Between the stuttery visual presentation, wonky physics, and the lack of adherence to how pool or snooker are supposed to work, it made the pool minigame in Duke Nukem Forever seem like a masterclass by comparison.
Piece of shit.
Duke, you don't have time to play with your balls.
And anyone who's attempted doing all of the side content knows the horror that is Breakout. It's just Breakout, for God's sake. How do you fuck up this badly while also having the gall to tie an achievement to it? The hitboxes are borked. The ball can just slide through an entire row of blocks off screen. You can get a game over even if you save the ball just because it moves slightly too far below the pedal. God damn it, I was so close! Okay, there we go. That took me so much longer than I'm willing to admit. That's probably never getting patched, by the way. I get the feeling it's busted by design just to drive completionists mad. Recently I've been trying to beat out a compulsion I have to go for 100% completion as much as I do. It had gotten to a point that I'd end up pouring many hours into trying to finish everything in minigames even when that process long since stopped being fun. Sometimes it's fine with just being content to make it to the end.
Liar!
But I guess I should touch on story mode a bit more. Story mode is split into 5 chapters which are each structured like an episode of a TV show, progressing as usual, jumping between plot beats, sporadic rhythm segments, often culminating in a flashy climax before a credit roll. And not for nothing, those segments are absolutely the highlight of the game, cleverly weaving together different types of rhythm challenges you were exposed to throughout the chapter and putting them into practice in a huge flashy sequence. The 1-2 punch of the prison break and train escape in chapter 2 being a sight to behold. Visual presentation is top notch with plenty of bouncy animations during regular interactions, and even fully animated cutscenes which you almost never see from projects of this scale. I love the way the world looks, and all the big story beats look incredibly stylish with a great blend of 2D and 3D effects. So many picturesque sights that are wallpaper worthy. The story unfortunately gets off to a very slow start. Not a lot happens in Chapter 1, while Chapter 2 is a very repetitive back and forth in a prison that goes on for way too long. All across story mode the pacing is kind of all over the place. There were many prolonged sections where you'd just been walking from one place to another with not much going on, sometimes upwards of half an hour of wandering and expositing before you got to do another rhythm game. Things at least pick up with the climactic sequences after you escape prison, and Chapters 3 and 4 are a lot better. You get more freedom to explore the world and interact with the inhabitants, discover all sorts of secrets, all that good stuff. Just mind your step in some areas though, because I got soft-locked a couple times by clipping into the terrain. While the voice acting is pretty serviceable for an entirely in-house production, dialogue is very sporadically voiced. Not even in the sense that there are some scenes that are voiced and some that aren't. That's normal. I mean, like mid-conversation there are some lines that just don't have voiceover even if they're coming from characters who are otherwise voiced. There's also a lot of dialogue where characters will talk over one another. Some of them seem to be framed like the character is being interrupted, so I can assume that's deliberate, but the way it's implemented is questionable. Sometimes one character would barely get a word in before being interrupted, but they'll still continue their sentence while the other interrupting party is talking. It feels remarkably unfinished. Contents of the plot itself are also a bit of a mixed bag. The world is a pretty typical comical exaggeration of a fascist police state serving as a vehicle for the main characters coming together. The world building is pretty scattershot, and most of the cast don't get a whole lot of development outside of Beat and Quaver, whose moments together are very much intended to be the emotional heart of the story. Their burgeoning sisterly bond is sweet to see given both of their history and familial issues. Not much else of the overall story really gripped me though. The whole rebelling against a corrupt police state thing also came across as trite and terminally online to me. I say this as a card-carrying early 90s millennial. Millennial stories about rebellion are almost universally cringeworthy. Now, I know these kinds of people, I'm even friends with some of them, and they talk such a big game about toppling authority and sticking it to the man, but it is such performative wish fulfillment peacocking. They're usually the kind of folks who cry if someone raises their voice at them or have a panic attack if they have to order food over the phone. It's like watching developmentally stunted teenagers lashing out at their parents. So many hostile interactions in this game feel framed like a shower argument where the antagonists have no good rebuttals. And also I hate this modern framing people have of justifying shoplifting, because it's morally okay to steal from big corporations and the people doing it are just hard done by folks trying to survive. Like, yeah, I get it, big corporations suck and times are tough, but shoplifters are not Robin Hood. I have worked multiple jobs in and out of retail that have had to deal with processing theft, and believe you me, these motherfuckers are not stealing food to feed their families. It's either petty stuff like candy bars and a bag of chips, or the kind of things they can fob off on Facebook Marketplace to support frivolous desires or their drug habits. A lot of Beat's dialogue features that line of thinking, and it just made her unlikable to me. By the end of Chapter 4, I started feeling pretty detached. They had me for a bit, and then they lost me. There's a huge plot dump, a twist along with it, the suggestion that there's some dimensional or time travel shenanigans going on, then the entirety of Chapter 5 is over an hour of jumping between locations, character perspectives, time periods, and even planes of existence. More so in an abstract sense than literal time travel. Or maybe it isn't, I'm honestly not sure. It was all over the place and gave me flashbacks to the climax of Neo The World Ends With You, which isn't a good thing. We get Beat's backstory all at once, which goes over aspects of her life and strained relationships, and any actual gameplay takes a distant back seat. It's backloaded as fuck. It's all stuff that took place before the events that led the world to being how it is after Harm took over, and it has basically nothing to do with the rest of the story outside of informing why Beat is the way she is. There's a lot of details I'm probably missing because I was getting lost by this point, but my investment was waning by now. If you struggle with ADHD or hate your parents, then maybe all of this will hit closer to home for you. But at the risk of sounding unsympathetic, I've had people repeatedly trauma dump to me without provocation, getting testy with me if I understandably didn't have anything to say in response, and I just do not have the fucking patience for it anymore. This felt like I was reliving those moments. I'm sure that wasn't the intention at all, but that's how it made me feel. There's merits to the story for sure, but the way it's told leaves a lot to be desired. If story mode isn't that enticing for those coming to a rhythm game for the rhythm game part, then the other half of Unbeatable is here for you, arcade mode. I love the UI design here. It radiates the kind of look you'd see in an old turn of the millennium racing game or Japanese arcade games. Arcade mode is pure unadulterated rhythm game goodness. Just you, a huge selection of songs, and a ranking system to keep you competing with yourself. There are folios with a whole bunch of optional challenges to be completed as well, which were good fun to try finishing going off the vague completion descriptions. Nice of them to also include stuff like hidden tracks, UI themes, and additional difficulty settings. As should be expected from a good rhythm game, the OST is pretty great. A huge selection of original tracks made just for this game, both from story mode and a bunch of extras in the form of remixes and a few guest tracks. They did a great job integrating and utilizing a variety of different genres. Mad props to Peak Divide and especially Rachel Lake for having a pretty impressive vocal range. Some I could take or leave, like the cop beat or baseball minigame themes, but there were quite a few standout songs that I liked enough to even find home in my regular music rotation. Proper Rhythm and Worn Out Tapes were my favourite songs as far as composition goes. Empty Diary I also quite enjoyed because I have a soft spot for 2000s pop punk and this captures that era pretty well. The Sound Circlet version was also my favourite remix of the bunch. Other highlights would be Neo Elsewhere, Forever Now, Mirror, Call Home, and Low, the last of which only slightly counts because it's a guest song from another game called No Straight Roads. Maybe I'll have to check that out at some point. Gameplay wise, the most fun I had as far as track layout goes were probably Expert Mode for Sleeping In and Forever Now. Those two in particular were very fun to learn. My difficulty Goldilocks zone appeared to be around Hard and Expert for most tracks since I found those the most fun. A few on easier difficulty had sound charts so sparse I ended up paying more attention to their visual proximity than accounting for where they were in the beat, which threw me off a little. Seeing the diminishing scores as the difficulty went up was amusing though, just song after song of ASS I like the way they continue injecting some humor in here too. There's a song with a title so long that watching the whole thing scroll by in the bottom corner takes well over a minute. The song Yeah 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 has Koni Yagami's chart credit changed to Koni Ya 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 Yagami. And there's also a song in here that's basically a minute-long shitpost with ridiculously difficult chart layout. It's absolutely dreadful. I haven't heard something this offensive to my ears since I was exposed to Hello Kitty Suicide Club. Don't look it up. The titular Unbeatable difficulty certainly lived up to its name though, because holy shit are some of these tough. There were a few tracks I was able to clear on this difficulty since they were slightly more complex versions of their expert mode charts, but the gulf in difficulty for some of these tracks was insanity. Look at this. Look at this. How on earth are you supposed to keep up with any of this? There's so many prompts on screen that most of it has no correlation to the actual music. I can barely even hear the music over all of my inputs. I can button mash with the best of them, but not in rhythmic sequence, and especially not on alternating buttons. And would you believe that some tracks have difficulty settings even higher than this? Mad respect to the folks who can steamroll rhythm games at their highest difficulties, but you guys are freaks. Unbeatable was undeniably a passion project for everyone involved, and it really shows, warts and all. It's a very fun and addictive rhythm game with tons of style and great tunes with an unfortunately messy story mode attached. It's worth giving it the once over to unlock the extra tracks, but I'd say arcade mode is definitely the highlight here. And hey, if they end up releasing a DLC mode that's nothing but beating the brick out minigame like the printer from Office Space, I'll retroactively bump it up in the ranking. For the handful of you who saw the 2023 rendition of the Backlog Bash, you may remember Little Gator Game, an adorable wee explorative adventure filled with charming characters, funny dialogue, and a sense of wonder that perfectly captured the essence of childlike imagination. It was one of my favourite games I played that year, and brought me back to fond memories of crafting entire fantasy journeys that I embarked on with my younger sister at home and my friends at school. Then early last year, out of the blue, we got an announcement that we'd be getting an all-new expansion pack similar in scale to the base game called Little Gator Game in the Dark. I recently double-dipped and bought the Switch version of Little Gator Game for a replay in preparation for the new DLC. Still just as charming as I remembered it from 3 years ago. But what was left to be seen was what could be done with an expansion pack for a game like this. So back I ventured into the scales of our intrepid hero, Gumbo. In the Dark takes place pretty much right after the end of the main game, where all the friends have been established, the playground kingdom has been kitted out, and the Gator's older sister has come along to join the adventure. The friends are confronted by the evil Dark Lord, who has spent the whole day plotting away in the caverns beneath the park. He intends to launch an attack on the Gator's kingdom and burn it to the ground. But when his minions fail to show, he retreats underground with the heroes in tow. From here, they need to explore the vast cave system, thwart all three of Darklord's henchmen, and put a stop to his dastardly plans. Structurally, it plays out similarly to the main game, but rather than helping your three friends solve their dilemmas, you need to confront Darklord's three lieutenants. Once you've gathered enough new friends from throughout the caves, you can rally them together to take them on. Each of these encounters takes the form of their own unique minigames, which is neat to see compared to the base game's approach usually being, go here and talk to a guy. One being a race where you must use every dirty trick at your disposal to win, one being a stealth mission where you have to clear all the enemies in the area without waking a sleeping bear, and my favourite of the lot where you're pulled into shooting a movie with choose your own adventure elements to it. There are so many ways you can completely derail the story, and it features some of the funniest dialogue in the game. Right next to Avery remarking about how they'll be okay because this game is rated E. But as you talk to the trio and bump into Darklord throughout your journey, it becomes very clear he's just a maladjusted, petulant child in desperate need of a positive role model. Honestly, it was refreshing seeing this kind of behaviour in a story being exhibited by a literal kindergartner for once, and not coming from alleged adults. It was a very sweet resolution and a good way of showing how Gumbo had matured while still maintaining his childlike naivete. I overall preferred the main story, but this right here was a nice addendum. The general gameplay of In the Dark is much the same as the base game, wandering around the area breaking down cardboard monsters, meeting new characters and fulfilling quests for them in exchange for new items. But let me tell you, these new items are nothing to sneeze at. There's plenty of new unlockable equipment that come with both more advanced movement tech and special abilities, which is nice since the swords and shields in the base game were all functionally identical with a different skin. New weapons have two separate forms of attacks depending on whether you're grounded or in the air. The pickaxe and club can either slam the ground directly in front of you, or do a flipping jump. Also including the added ability of breaking down rock walls to open up new areas, complete with splash damage to clear multiple cardboard foes at once. The Bubble Wand and Ribbon do regular AoE swishing on the ground, but mid-jump can give you a pretty decent boost in the air. Then there's the Polearm and Rotor Blade, which allow you to do a propeller motion while moving, and while in the air get some mad distance in no time flat. This was definitely my favourite. You can also get a Jar of Goo, which is like one of those throwable projectile items, but it throws tons of them at the same time. How exactly does a game with no actual combat in it have more satisfying and varied attacks and movement tech than many other games that do? Spider Gator, we'll do those quests sooner or later. Can he ragdoll from the roof? Sure he will, he's a goof. Being set in a series of labyrinthine caverns, it's no surprise that the level layout is much more of a cavernous labyrinth this time around. You're given a plethora of options to more efficiently get around even if you didn't max out the climb bracelets in the base game, but navigation can initially be pretty confusing. There are landmarks in many areas to go off, but they're obviously not as easy to spot at a distance as you could with the wide open park topside. Still, there's a wide variety of obstacles and layouts to be found that are visually nice to look at on top of being a lot of fun to traverse. It also combines two of my favourite game design tropes of all time, interconnected worlds and secrets behind waterfalls. Just about every waterfall in the overworld now leads into a smaller cavern that can be broken down and lead into the greater cave system. I absolutely love stuff like that. The only downside is it doesn't have a huge amount of utility if you've finished the base game already. There's nothing more to do out there except find some new optional dialogue with old friends gathering near the waterfalls. Although a new game plus has been added now, so if you wish you can replay the base game with all of the unlocked equipment, including max climbing bracelets and the busted stuff from the DLC. You can even flick on baby mode from the get-go to make the journey 20% more adorable. New game plus speedruns are going to get very interesting with the addition of the rotor flying. Little Gator game in the dark was a fun little package and a wonderful addition to an already wonderful game. Doing everything took me a bit over 4 hours, so it's not quite as long as the base game, but still a very enjoyable time that makes the full game feel like an even more complete package. It's video game junk food time with another incremental game. I remarked last time with a game about feeding a black hole that a lot of these can kinda blend together. For instance, this is another one about breaking rocks in space, but with a touch of mining resources and finding artifacts. All it's missing is an unstoppable computer program, and then it would be a perfect amalgamation of all the other incremental games I've played so far. Space Rock Breaker has you piloting a ship through space, blowing up meteors and salvaging the precious materials from within, earning money to further upgrade yourself until you're lightspeed jumping between zones and blowing up everything in sight. The visual and audio design in this game is very slot machine-esque, specifically tailored for that gradual dopamine rush. When materials have been gathered at the end of an expedition, they're gradually dropped into this plinko machine. You not only get monetary bonuses from the slots in the bottom, but the pigs can also be upgraded to give extra when hit. It's super satisfying watching all of the ores pile up like that in the side and just plink down as all the numbers come off of them. While your ship and weapons are upgraded by spending money on the skill tree, there are crates out in space that contain keys which can be used for loot boxes. Nice to see these in games that aren't trying to nickel and dime you at every turn. Loot box prizes will dish out a bunch of upgrades to the Blinko machine to keep increasing your return on gems and ores. Once you've lightspeed jumped through enough of the zones, you can also come across rocks containing artifacts, a set amount of collectibles that will upgrade more permanent modifiers for you. From both passive abilities and temporary weapons found out in space, your ship can grow to do monstrous amounts of damage. Though in a cruel irony, the gameplay gradually becomes less satisfying the stronger you get, honestly. You're destroying so many rocks off screen right as they're spawning that it makes everything feel so barren. This is something a game about feeding a black hole definitely did a lot better, with destructible mass constantly warping in to keep the screen very busy. That's about all there is for this one. I call these games junk food because they're quick, easy, don't require a whole lot of thought, and big number go up, more dopamine please. It's enjoyable and addictive for the short time you spend playing it, but still disposable empty calories that are comfortable to play in between other titles with more going on. I'll try not to make it a habit to do one of these per video, or I'm probably gonna fast run out of things to talk about unless I find one of these with a really unique premise or mechanics. Now this one has been a long time coming. God of War is one of those series where for years I've played countless knockoffs or titles that took heavy inspiration from it, but never the progenitor itself. Not for lack of access or anything, just laziness. I've owned it for years. Better late than never, I suppose, which is half the reason I'm doing these videos. God of War follows Kratos, a mighty Spartan warrior on a quest for revenge to kill Ares, the titular god of war. But that is an undertaking that no mere mortal is able to accomplish, so he is guided along the way by others in the Pantheon to gain the power contained within Pandora's box, so that he may best his foe. I'm not the most well-versed in Greek mythology, but I've heard from countless people who are super into it that God of War very much plays things fast and loose with its subject matter, which is totally fine. This mythology is ripe for all sorts of stories with larger-than-life figures involved. Despite seeming shallow on the surface, I really do appreciate what they do with Kratos' character here. He is his own Greek tragedy, combining his hunger for power and being emboldened by the gods, only to end up getting tricked into slaughtering his loved ones for his hubris, and then seeking revenge on the god who wronged him. He lives a life of mindless hedonism, but only born out of grief and trying to feel something after his own actions brought him to this downward spiral. The section later on where Kratos has to defend a manifestation of his wife and daughter was particularly powerful, as a blending of narrative and gameplay. Fighting off the hordes and Kratos sacrificing his own life force in a vain attempt to keep them alive. Given its upward reputation for being a very gory power fantasy for 12-year-old boys, there's more depth here than many give it credit for, and that really had me sympathizing with Kratos as a character. Presentation here is fantastic. Being a late-in-life PS2 game, they were firing on all cylinders, showing off excellent architecture with some gorgeous pre-baked lighting, smooth animations, and some of the nicest water I've seen on the PS2 since Ratchet & Clank 3. The soundtrack is booming and feels huge, doing a great job lifting the scale of destruction happening all around Athens. God of War is well renowned for its combat, and even 21 years later it was incredibly satisfying to sink my teeth into. An ever-evolving combo system with hordes and hordes of vicious enemies to carve apart, who will not hesitate to do the same to you if you give them an inch. It's rich in that bloodthirsty 2000s edge, a product of its time in the best way. There have been rumours of the Greek trilogy getting remade for several years now, and if that does end up happening, I can guarantee you it'll be muted beyond recognition. Modern day Sony greenlighting anything with gore and sensual nudity to the extent of these games? No way in hell. In general, I don't think I've played a hack and slash with this degree of gore since probably Prototype 2, and that was 14 years ago now. In fact, hack and slash games have been kinda sparse for a long time now. Seems whenever anyone tries to do action games now, they lean more on the Souls-like formula than your God of War, Devil May Cry, or Ninja Gaiden. From the outside looking in, even the Norse-era God of War games have seemingly changed up their combat not particularly for the better. But that's only from seeing footage, I'll get to them someday to see for myself. The combat was good fun for the most part, but some encounters became more aggravating than fun. A lot of the larger horde battles became stun-lock fests if you had the gall to try getting off a combo longer than 2 hits. And the end leg on the dodge roll was killing me, man. The amount of attacks that I tried to evade only to still get hit, because either the distance wasn't great enough or Kratos would be stuck there at the end of it for long enough to get hit by something else. This game was also one of the early adopters of patronizingly offering you to tune down the difficulty if you die enough times. This became even more aggravating to me because difficulty settings only affect combat, and despite my minor gripes, combat was not the cause of the majority of my deaths. That would be the more puzzle-centric encounters, the multitude of countdown segments for one, put in a scenario where you have to do a thing in a limited window of time, and failing to do so means instant death. The area with the wall closing in on you and the room with the trapdoor floor in particular were driving me spare. Sometimes enemies would be evasive enough or cluster together in different groups early on that I already knew I was fucked. Pushing that caged husk up that slope while being accosted by multiple enemies was obnoxious, and some attempts had them eventually respawning so quickly that it was way less trouble just taking the death and trying again fresh. And while it wasn't exactly a death sentence every time, I could not stand those bits where you have to scale across walls or long sections of rope while fending off oncoming enemies. These all sucked, just mashing buttons until they fall off with little in the way of strategy. Platforming also isn't the best, which could be a lot worse since there aren't that many do-or-die sections and no fall damage. A few areas in the pits of Hades were really testing me though. Kratos in a platforming context is all the grace of Mario after 3 Chicago-style pizzas. While I do appreciate that the puzzles and the more explorative sections were there so the game wouldn't just be non-stop combat, I do wish these were paced out a little better. Pandora's Temple was pretty bad with this, not helped that it took up what felt like 2/3 of the whole game. I really enjoyed God of War for what it was, but it's also one of those games I think I would have appreciated a lot more experiencing it when it was brand new, since I've been spoiled by the ways this particular genre went on to evolve in other series. It really feels like it was still trying to find its feet. Same sort of feeling I had playing Devil May Cry 1. Neat to see where it all began, but I have no doubt the series went on to further improve, and I am very much looking forward to it.
In the flea market so early. I've been working here since my mama was a baby.
Parappa the Rapper is often cited as an icon from the early days of the PlayStation. For years I always saw him getting rep and collages and appearances in celebratory games like PlayStation All-Stars or Astro Bot. The original game even got remastered releases a couple different times. I've seen footage over the years and thought the art style was pretty striking. I dig the simple paper cutout sort of look it's going for, and the music is enjoyably goofy. I'm now wondering if a lot of that was the mascot equivalent of a participation trophy for him just showing up at the time, because now I've actually finished it. Holy mother of God. This is one of the worst rhythm games I've ever played. The game will throw a few prompts at you and will grade you every few lines as shown with the scaling system represented on screen. How does it grade you exactly? Beats the fuck out of me. I tried to time my inputs along with the visual prompter, I tried to time my inputs with the beat of the music. Whether I got a good grade for doing either of these felt like a complete roll of the die. The visual indicators on screen are almost a full second off the actual music, and the fact it doesn't even give you sufficient visual feedback for how close your input was not helping matters. Anytime I completed a stage felt like luck. I'd have so many bung inputs along the way and still got a pass, while attempts I thought I did much better failed me. And this was me playing the PS1 version. From what I've heard, the remasters on PSP and PS4 were even worse for how bad the timing was. The framing of the game itself I thought was perfectly fine. A very stylized world where a hero makes his way through a series of very mundane conflicts while trying to win the affection of his sweetheart by rapping his way to victory. The songs were very amusing in their corniness, with my personal favourites being the bathroom rap and the flea market salesman. That guy in particular sounded like the rapper Shaggy fresh out of dental surgery. It's just too bad playing the actual game is complete balls. I think it's kind of telling that Parappa's catchphrase of "I gotta believe" got an offhanded reference in the first Spyro the Dragon, and we're at a point now where this is more attributed to Spyro than it ever was to Parappa, because Parappa sucks and deserves to be consigned to the dustbin of history. And how about that Spyro 4 announcement though? I'm a little skeptical about the whole free-flying approach is going to work while retaining its platformer gameplay or interesting level design. I still remember Dawn of the Dragon, but if Toys for Bob can make lightning strike twice like they did with Crash 4, then I'll be very happy. I was a PlayStation kid growing up, but the PS3 was a generation I initially skipped in favour of the 360, on account of the price and notable lack of worthwhile titles for a long time. From the outside looking in, I did see more than a few mainstay PS3 exclusives I did want to play someday though, with LittleBigPlanet being among the top contenders. Though I've owned a PS3 for 13 years now, so my punctuality still needs work. LittleBigPlanet was the debut title of Media Molecule, who are well known for their games with a strong focus on player-driven content. Their other standout titles being Tearaway, one of the few reasons to own a PS Vita, and Dreams, hands down their most robust creation tool to date, which I still see ongoing projects being made for. LittleBigPlanet puts you in the midst of Sackboy, an adorable little player surrogate pitted against a series of side-scrolling platformer gauntlets. You can find all sorts of collectibles along the way to kit out your Sackboy, or find objects and stickers to build things to your heart's content. A lot of this game's enjoyment seemed to come down to the community integration, but unfortunately because I'm coming to this years late, all of that is gone now. It was kind of melancholic beating the final boss and getting a message effectively saying, "You can find friends out there in the LittleBigPlanet community. Start downloading custom levels now." That was on me for not getting to it sooner. I've owned this game for ages and I was still late to the party. I should take this as a sign to start checking out more user-made content and Dreams before that game's servers are eventually shut down in the next 10 years. Visual presentation here is great for its time. Plenty of details that make the world look distinctly handcrafted with some nice looking lighting and texture work. Sackboy remains one of the most memorable designs to come out of the 7th console generation, and it's just concentrated cute. Stephen Fry's narration is also a welcome treat, delivering that dry British wit in a calming voice like the vocal equivalent of a warm hug. Beyond the customization aspects, this game is largely a pretty standard physics-based 2D platformer that does kind of stand out with the mechanic allowing you to move between a few planes on the Y-axis, something which overall could feel a little cumbersome at times, the way I would often move in and out of planes when I didn't want to. I would say it's a more modern approach to a 2D platformer, but I can't really say that because this game will be 20 in 2 years.
You're old.
I don't really have much to say about this one if I'm being honest. LittleBigPlanet was a fun enough platformer, but probably not one I see myself going back to. As much as I love the crafted looking aesthetic and more simple mechanics, to me it doesn't compare as favourably to Media Molecule's PS Vita outing, Tearaway. Maybe that's just my 3D platformer bias speaking. There is still the matter of LittleBigPlanet 2 though, which from what I hear is a marked improvement on the first in many ways, but in favour of having a bit of variety to my backlog journey, that will have to wait for another time. Another video down. I do realise this has mostly consisted of games that came out in the last year or two, mostly because of the pile-up of titles I wanted to eventually check out during the months I spent on the Exodus video. I initially started this series because I wanted to focus more on some of the established all-time greats I've been neglecting for all these years. Part of me has been thinking going forward I could have a more direct theme for each episode. Like for one, I could cover a bunch of infamous or accepted bad titles in my backlog, do nothing but PS1 games, cover sequels to games I did in the 2023 video, or even have one based entirely on voted viewer requests if I really want to be daring. If you have any suggestions or feedback on how I could improve the format, I'm always open to ideas. But on that note, that's all I have to say for the time being. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Whenever that may be.